Mask your baseboard, put a piece of masking on the floor, catch your demo cutout, your mess. Several ways cut out a patch. Cutout. So there's many ways you can use to cut this out. You can use a level or T-square pencil. You could square it off, cut out that way, or a small piece. I already have a piece cut out. Easiest way is just take a patch, sheetrock patch a little bigger than the hole, put it up to it. Use this as a template. Take your pencil, mark your edges, mark your edges, mark your edges. I also like to mark the top here and mark the top there so I know which side the sheetrock is. Cut out. You could use a jab saw, keyhole saw, or just a razor blade. Whatever you have is easiest. I like to just use a nice new razor blade like this. Since now you made the template lines, just go ahead and cut them out. Cut them out. Cut them out. Cut them out. Easy enough. If you squirt deep enough, it should just snap right off. Also, keep a piece of the cutout so you have a paint match. You can take that piece to any paint store and get a paint match. Patch like that, you only need a little bit of paint, maybe like a little sample paint, less than a quart. But go ahead and keep your paint match, that way you have it. Get it all taken out, and take your razor blade, clean the edges. If you wanted to make a larger area, you can cut from stud to stud, but the studs over here and the studs over here are about 24. So instead of cutting it from stud to stud, just use backing. Some guys like to use backing. Or you can use these metal clips. These metal clips work good, but they're not cheap. These metal clips kind of go on there. You put a screw or two in there, and then you put the patch in and you put those in, but I don't really use these. I have these from a job that I did and someone gave me some. These kind of get it pricey, so that's why I like to use 1x2s, easier to use for wood backing. Basic wood backing you can put here, 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 wherever you want, but you want to at least get backing on both sides or top and bottom. In the ideal world, each side and top bottom 4 pieces would be a strong patch, but we're just for this small patch going to do one on each side. 1/2 inch sheetrock, you just use 1 1/4 screws to 1 1/2 screws. These are coarse drywall screws for wood framing. If you use metal framing, you have to use fine thread screws. Go ahead and put your screws in this vacuum. Once you get it all cut out and the backing in, since I marked it here and marked it there, I know the piece of sheetrock goes up. Sometimes if it's tight, you might have to cut it back, but it fits pretty good. I'm going to run the razor inside here. Looks good. Put a few screws on. This is an impact drill. It's a little aggressive, so you don't have to use an impact drill, just a regular drill would work. I'm using this one because my other one's charging. Plenty of screws, nice and tight. 6-inch knife time. Always scrape your sides. This gets any goobers like this off, any rough spots. I also like to scrape the outside edge, so if there's any boogers on the wall, it gets them off. Fiberglass mesh tape. This is always a big discussion on what kind of tapes to use. Just use fiberglass mesh tape. There's so many tapes out there in the market. Repair work, your go-to item is fiberglass mesh tape. Don't use paper tapes. Don't use these special infused tapes. Just use a good old-fashioned fiberglass tape. It won't fail if you use it correctly. Tape your seams. I take my 6-inch knife, cut it, push it down. Go past your joints, and then I like to overlap this section. I don't go right here, I like to overlap. That way the corners are really strong because you have fiberglass overlapping fiberglass. Overlap it. Overlap it. That way it's double layer on all the corners, the weakest point of the patch. Use your 6-inch knife, push it down. This stuff is naturally sticky. It doesn't have the real strong stick, but it's enough to hold it to the wall until you're ready to mud it. Sometimes these little strings come off. If you need to peel the strings off the work area like this one, just go ahead and take them off. They're easier to pull off now before you put mud on. Just pull these little strings off. That's the only problem with fiberglass. But it's ready for first coat. So now we're going to do a first coat. I'm going to use a hot mud, a 5-minute mud. You can use a joint compound, but I'm going to use a hot mud because I got to get this job done in one trip. All your hanging stuff's done, so go ahead and put away your hanging tools because now you're going to start mudding, so you don't want your tools in the way of your work area. Don't need these no more, put them away. Don't need my pencil, don't need my screw gun, don't need my screws. Extra backing I brought in, I don't need those anymore. So I'm going to put everything away. So now we're ready for the mud process. Alright, you don't need much first coat mud. It has to be pretty heavy. This is the first coat. With fiberglass, a trick I like to do is always get the mud pushed inside the fiberglass seams. Push down hard. This helps the tape get pushed in and also helps fill in the gap. Gets all that mud in the mesh and gets inside the gap between the new sheetrock and the old sheetrock. It gets it pushed in there. That's the secret of using fiberglass. Anyone complains about using fiberglass, well, you gotta learn how to fill it in so you get a nice patch. Once you get it filled in like that, now you can turn around and use a bigger coating knife. I'm using a 12-inch knife. Coat it out. Any extra mud, go ahead and dump it. Let that set up. Since I'm using hot mud, I want to get these extra mud out of my pan, get it cleaned up before I come in here. Quick set muds, this is a 5-minute mud, so it's going to set up in about 5 minutes. If you're using a joint compound, you're going to have to let a joint compound set up overnight. Well, let's go ahead and let this mud set up. In the meantime, go ahead and clean your tools. You must clean your tools when you're done using them. This is a hot mud, so it's a 5-minute mud. So it's been about 4 minutes. It's starting to set up. It's not fully dry. The secrets of working hot muds, you don't let them fully set up. Once they're starting to set up, you take a damp sponge. This is a slick out technique. This is only used with hot muds. If you're using a joint compound, then you're going to have to use a sanding method after it dries the next day. But with hot muds, you let it set up. 5 minute sets up about 4 to 6 minutes. 20 minute the same, probably around, I'd check it on 15 to 25 minutes. 40 minutes the same, about 35 minutes, 45 minutes. Once it starts setting up, go ahead and get rid of the edges. I just kind of go over it real quick with the sponge. Use a 6-inch knife, nice clean 6-inch knife. Slick out technique. We're basically taking off the extra mud, pushing it down, putting a little more effort, energy behind the knife, pushing the mud, basically slicking it out. This is a technique used for all hot muds. You can also go the opposite direction of your coating. I would compare this to like wet sanding technique. If you have any fiberglass that's sticking up, go ahead and just go the opposite direction and put it down. I'm taking off the extra mud. That's why we work with it before it sets up. Once it sets up, you're in trouble because it's going to set up like a cement. So that's why you got to catch it before it sets up. The edge around the patch, that's the most important. So we're going to let that set up for another couple minutes, and then we're going to follow through and do a tight second coat. It's pretty good here, but there's still some imperfections. So we're going to do a real tight second coat. And then once we do the second coat, we're going to let that dry again, and then it should be ready for texture. If it's still rough after your second coat procedure, then follow through with a really tight third coat. But this patch is only going to need 2 coats, so let's go ahead and just let this set up another couple minutes. In the meantime, while this is setting up, we're going to go ahead and mix a quarter of a pan of 5 minute, just a little bit of 5 minute, and we're going to make it a little thinner than the first coat. Just a simple, tight skim coat, and we're going to go past our original first coat with our second coat skim job. Alright, a couple minutes have passed. I mixed some mud. I don't need a lot because we're just doing a tight skim. Little tape, I can see some of the tape sticking through, so I'm just going to go through again and push it down. There you go, just like that, it's gone. As you can see, it's really set up now. So I'm going over it with the knife, and it's not doing anything with it except pushing it down more. Honestly, that looks so good right there. I can follow it through with this rough texture and be a perfect patch. But all my jobs, I do a minimum of 2 coats. So let's go ahead and do a tight skim coat. I like to just put my mud on, go past the original first coat. Basically used up all my mud, then just trowel it down, pushing down real hard and taking off the extra mud. You can also go the opposite direction if you want. But that's a nice, perfect, smooth patch. We're going to let that set up. In the meantime, same thing there. I have a little bit of extra mud in here, so you want to get rid of that mud, especially if it's hot mud. If it's joint compound, you can dump your joint compounds back in your bucket and reuse it. With these hot muds, you got to get them out of your pan and remove, because once they dry like a big rock, cement. That's why they call it hot muds, because once you add the water, it sets up like a cement. It's a strong material. And this is my extra mud for my first coat, wasted mud, but it sets up like a rock, so that's why we like to use these hot muds. This is more of a professional grade material. If you're not comfortable with mudding, of course use only a joint compound. But let's go ahead and clean our pan, our knives, our 6-inch knife while this is setting up. Let your second coat dry. Like I said, if your second coat still looks rough, you can still see dips and waves and imperfections in it, you're going to have to follow through with a third coat. But my second coat, after slicking it out, it's going to be a really nice, perfect coat. And sometimes putting too much mud on the wall, on the patch, is a bad thing because you're creating a big hump on the wall. what you're trying to do here, your job here is to fill in the deep areas where the mud's needed, not just smear a big glob of mud on. You got to fill in the deep areas where it's needed so you don't see a patch on the wall, big hump on the wall because you put too much materials on the wall. It's easier to add materials than it is to try to remove excess heavy patch materials. But let's go ahead and let that set up. Alright, it's been a few minutes. This patch is pretty good, pretty set up. Since I got rid of that feathered edge in the first coat, there's really no edge to sponge, but I'm going to go over a little lap mark there. If it was still rough, I'd probably follow it through with a really, really tight third coat just to fill in any imperfections. Texture. Out here we have different textures. This is a skip trowel texture. It's a heavier texture. So I'm just using a regular joint compound. This is a creamy mixed up mud. I'd say like a heavy creamy pancake batter consistency. I'm going to start on the outside edge. This is nothing to this texture. It's going to the angle. Any rough areas, take it up. Sometimes you can go the opposite direction, kind of feather it in, take it out further and wider. Trowel it down so it blends in. Really nothing to it. As you can tell. Nice patch, blended in. With the joint compounds are different than the coating muds. You have to let the joint compounds dry overnight, 24 hours. Once they dry, then you can turn around and sand it. Sanding, I'd like to use 150 to 220 grit sandpaper, or use like a foam sponge, like a fine or medium sponge, and just sand it down. That just knocks the burrs and the grittiness out of the texture. And then you can turn around, primer, then paint. Always sand and primer. Most textures need to be sanded. You're not sanding away the texture, you're just kind of getting rid of any imperfections and grittiness that the joint compounds naturally want to leave. Plus on a patch we're sanding the edges so it blends in nicely. Nice transition from new to old. But yeah, it's a simple patch. Little hole like that turned into a big area, so they're just going to have to paint this whole area now. Simple job, easy to do. A wall patch repair. If you haven't sent a like yet, please like this video, leave a comment, subscribe. Thanks for viewing. Drywall Repairman. We also have plenty of other videos like this on patching, so go ahead and jump in the channel. This will be a playlist under wall patching, so I got wall patching videos, stress crack videos, plumbing videos, electrical videos. So there's all kinds of videos on different types of drywall patching repairs, but the process is pretty much the same. So go ahead and watch a few videos and train yourself to see if you want to actually do it yourself repairs. Maybe you'll watch a few of these videos and decide you want to hire a professional. When in doubt, always hire a professional. Sometimes it looks easier than it really is because we do this every day. Hey, thanks for viewing and thanks for liking. Thank you.